Hello, welcome. Yes. So, welcome to this first session on philosophy of Samkhya by Kapil. So it's 6:30 in Houston. So we will devote an hour on Sankhya philosophy by Kapil. This is a course which will run until about middle of December. So we will have about 12 to 13 sessions. And I want to give you an overview of the philosophy of Sankhya by Kapil. This is one of the 6 books of Vedic philosophy. They are namely Sankhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshik, Mimamsa, and Vedanta. So the second one, which is Yoga by Patanjali, if not that book, at least that term, Yoga has become very well known throughout the world nowadays. But what people usually think Yoga is actually Hatha Yoga. Patanjali Yoga is the classical Yoga. And that is second book in the series. So Patanjali is the author of the philosophy of yoga and Kapil is his predecessor. So we will be discussing Kapil's book called Samkhya, which has a very wide coverage. To write the philosophy of yoga in greater detail, which is covered in Samkhya also. I prepared a couple of slides. Let's look at them. Yeah, this is a screen share feature of webinar. So I'm using a tool called Webinars on Air by Google. So it allows screen share. And the good thing is, as soon as the session is over, this automatically prepares a YouTube recording. So some of our friends who are not able to attend the session, whether in Houston or in their homes, they will be able to see its recording later on. And even if you attend it, if you want to review it, you can look at the recording later on. So this is the title slide. I want to give you a slight historical overview so that you can place Sankhya properly. And when it comes to ancient Indian history, I must say what I am presenting here is so-called an orthodox view, which is a classical view in India, but is not in mainstream. Historians will not accept it. But nevertheless, this is important so that you can understand the place of Sankhya in proper perspective. So it is believed that first humans walked on the earth some millions of years ago. You know, the Indian historical timeline is quite long. The earth, the life has a lifespan, and that is 4.32 billion years. That figure is mentioned in Atharvaveda, that the universe as it exists has a lifetime, but that is also in a time parameter when it is brought into existence. I will not be able to go into all this philosophy, how space and time are created. The point is, like in our day-to-day life, this is currently daytime, and later in the evening it becomes night. So in a time duration of 24 hours, we have a cycle of day and night. And then whole thing is cyclic. So after day, night, then again a day and night, it goes on. So 24 hours shows a cycle, and then there is a cycle of, so that corresponds to the earth spinning around its own axis. Then there is a cycle of about 28 or so days, which is a lunar month. The moon circles around the earth. Then there is a cycle of 12 months in a year roughly, when the earth completes a revolution around the sun. And there are more and more such cycles. Some of them are known to us, some are not known to us. But in this philosophy, this is what is called 4.32 billion years, is the daytime, is called Brahmadin. So when universe is in existence, afterwards, when that cycle 4.32, suppose it is a sinusoidal wave, 4.32 billion years are over, then begins dissolution of this. So this material world, in all its beauty and myriads, they came from some kind of plasma of basic particles, an ocean of basic particles. It is called Samudra Arnavat. So there is an ocean of particles which is homogeneous, nothing is moving. If there is nothing moving, there is no time then. And if there is no reference point, there is no coordinate system, then there is no space. So it comes basically to that state that is called Brahmayati. So now it is the night of the creation. So this is the day of the creation, then 4.32 billion years. Night time of the creation. Of course, the time doesn't quite exist when it is night time, but we don't want to go into those details. So there is a cycle of 4.32 billion years on the upside of the sinusoidal wave, and then there is a negative side of 4.2. So this is infinite in this direction, infinite in that. So this has been always happening. So actually there is no origin of time. This is infinity here and infinity there. But there is a huge cycle which is called Brahmadin and Brahmayati. 4.32 billion years is one universe day of the universe. And within that there are many, many cycles, like we are familiar with this 24-hour cycles of day and night. So this is all that is there. So we are in the current cycle of the current universe, which some million of years ago, human beings appeared on the earth. We won't go into details. How did they appear? And so on and so forth, because time is limited. But this is what is conjecture. There is a chronology here in our tradition. When we do certain rituals, first thing we do is the scholar is supposed to recite a sankalp. Like somebody asked me, how do you know this is year 2016? I will say I was born 1952. When I was 5-7 years, I started counting it. But if somebody says, before 1952, who was counting it? Oh, this is 2016 with reference to a reference point of 180 or 080, whatever it is. As an individual, I have not counted, but the human society, I trust them, my predecessors and their predecessors. We have been counting it, and I'm quite confident this is year 2016. That is what I will say, isn't it? I have no other good reply. In the same manner, in the Indian context, there is a Sanskrit long statement that is called Sankalp, which we have been reciting always and always. So that has this number certain million of years ago. So people have been counting it. Now, just like I am confident about 2016, we have reasons to be confident about that number also. But I don't want to go more into that detail. We are now just looking at an overview, but talking about India, which is where certain books somehow originated in a particular language called Sanskrit. We are looking at that box of the Vedic literature. So that place which is currently called India, according to the literature, it went through a massive spiritual decline about 6,000 years ago. That is our view. 6,000 years ago, because as it happens, there is nothing to be worried about. Any society goes through ups and downs, and usually a society is at a climax, pinnacle, then there is all kinds of negative forces overtake them, and then, so we have seen in our own recent history, France was world power, ruling even England and all that. Then France declined, then Britain became the world power. Now Britain is not that global power. Now it is America is at the top. America may also decline, then China will come. So all this happens. So that is what there was a time India was climax, but spiritual decline began 6,000 years ago. That resulted in a major event which is very important in Indian history, a great war, what is called Mahabharata war. That was about 5,000 years ago, when cousins were fighting for a piece of land. And that caused further decline. It was due to the decline, but such negative events decline. Then after that, the decline was at a higher rate. However, that's why I am saying, that's why I emphasize the word spiritual decline, because even otherwise, India continued to be very rich country until about 300 years ago. So, in the past 2000 years ago, a lot of European explorers were wanting to come to India, Marco Polo and Vasco da Gama. Even Columbus actually wanted to come to India but went to the opposite direction. A lot of people from China also, under the influence of Buddhism, went Samkhya and a lot of people. Because India was rich materially as well as spiritually, was not that bad. There was a lot of things there. But then after this last 300 years, we came under foreign rule, even prior to that under Mughal Muslims rule. So last 700-800 years, India has been under foreign rules. But now last 70 years, we at least have political freedom and it is truncated India now. Otherwise, it was greater India. So this is in very brief what is the history. Again, I will say orthodox view. But in this historical perspective is corroborated because we have an evidence. And what is the evidence is our literature. So we have literature which is of distinct, different kinds. So let's look at that literature. So because of that Mahabharata, it is interesting to look at the Indian history prior to Mahabharata and after Mahabharata. So prior to Mahabharata, as I said, 6,000 years ago, that decline would not have happened just on a day. There was marginal decline, and that is the thesis we are presenting here, that a human being by nature, if he is not careful, he will be spiritually devolving with time. So that is human nature. As I was born as a 4-year-old child, 5-year-old child, I was honest. But today I am not that honest as I was 4-5-year-old, isn't it? My honesty parameter hasn't increased since my childhood. It might have deteriorated with time. So that is at a micro level and is true at a macro level also. And that is what we are seeing in the Indian history. that at the very start point we have an age which we call Vedic age, when the society was guided by Vedas. Vedas are one book, but in 4 volumes. That is, in this orthodox picture, is considered as revealed knowledge. So, in this, like we will be talking Samkhya, so Sankhya will make reference to Vedas, and then that is treated as Pramana. Pramana means that is the true knowledge. So when something is borrowed from Vedas, it doesn't need any further evidence, further testimony. So this is called Agam or Shabda Pramana in their language of philosophers. So it is important to understand these different boxes of literature. So this is Vedic age, where the human society must have gone for millions of years. People were by and large very high quality people, and they had very good capacity, particularly fantastic memory, because these Vedas have 20,000 or so verses. And even now, some people have all those in their memories, but that time it must have been a very common feature. So imagine a class of people whose memory is fantastic and who are leading a life very spiritually at a high level. They are, I will say, leading the Vedic way of life. So if you are spiritually very high level, then your decline will be very, very slow. If you have already declined, now your rate of decline, the slope will be very high. So we are talking a human worth, spiritual content or spiritual level of a human being. So in the Vedic age, it is fairly high level. There is a decline, but decline is very, very marginal. That's why it prolongs for several millions of years. Nothing much is happening because there is no negative news. There is no war, not those kind of things. But now there is of course, there is a decline in the capacity that the majority of people are not able to maintain in their memory the entire Vedas and the Vedic knowledge. Of course, there are some providers who are teachers of. There is a fraction of people who are having this capacity, but majority of people now don't have those kind of capacities. So these teachers see the need to develop a body of literature which has gist of this literature. So that is called Upanishadic age. So now there are 11 principal Upanishads. They were created in this age because majority of people were not very comfortable with the 4 Vedas. They said we cannot grasp all that voluminously. We want its gist. So some teachers, we call them rishis, they created the gist of this message in the form of 11 principal Upanishads. Some more names are there. These are called Aranyakas and Brahmanas. Not going into those details, but Upanishads, as I said, knowledge is to know a thing as it is. You know, what is your knowledge? I say I have knowledge about this laptop computer. This is a thing. This has certain characteristics and features and behavior. If I know all that, then I say I have a knowledge about this laptop computer. So knowledge is to know a thing as it is. And if we walk out of this hall, this is entire universe, including stars and galaxies. This is infinitely sized universe. And if I have to have the knowledge of the entire universe, I have to have knowledge of everything that exists in the universe. Of course, which is beyond any human capacity. We know everything, very few things and very limited manner. There is nothing we know exactly, totally. So our concept is infinitesimal. We lack infinity in any dimension. whereas infinity is in infinite dimensions. There are infinite kind of things. Even a tree leaves will be infinite, even ocean waves are infinite, and even one ocean wave we cannot predict totally 100% correct. So there is an infinity of infinity, and we are very limited person. The point, we are not going into all those details. The point we are trying to make is there are distinct two kinds of things, and that's where I highlighted here, namely matter and spirit. There are certain things that possess consciousness, and there are certain things that don't have consciousness. Now, again, consciousness is a difficult concept, but we have to understand it, otherwise, we will not understand this body of literature, which is very peculiar. So, in this body of literature, the word they use is Jad and Chetan. So, I will try to minimize Sanskrit words. I may say it, probably some of you are familiar with them. So, ab initio, they look at the universe as broadly mix of two things. One is matter, which is void of consciousness, and then there are certain entities that possess consciousness. Now, on this right side, there are entities that possess consciousness. Now, here they have two kinds of things again. One is like my tiny consciousness, which is a like a delta function, a tiny point like singularity. But then there is an infinite consciousness that is called that supreme being, which has different names here, Brahma, Ishwar, and all those names. So these are the terms you will be hearing very often as we go into all this philosophical concept. They have an idea that matter, wherever it is, always goes through manifestation, always goes through change. And nowadays we don't find it difficult to comprehend. We are familiar with atomic structure, electrons are moving and things like that. So it is not awkward to accept it that anything that is material is, though I am looking at this desk, but in these moments it is undergoing change. Lattice structure, some molecules are moving here and there, some are vaporizing, some air particles are going in. All sorts of changes are taking place, whether it is amenable to my senses or not, but theoretically we should accept it. So that is what they have an idea that Jad, the matter, is always going through changes, and the consciousness, the inherent consciousness, is unchangeable. It goes through no manifestation. It doesn't go through any change. Broadly speaking, like I am now 60 plus now, if I close my eyes and I think about 20 years ago, 40 years ago, I can very well imagine I am in that place on that day, a particular experience which somehow left a very deep impression on me. I can recall it from my memory and almost become a part of it again. And imagine as if, not imagine, I will say I almost feel strongly. I have that affinity that 20 years ago, one who was sitting there in that position, going through that experience was me only. So the me has not changed, that I-ness. So that is something we can feel it sometimes, though we don't want to argue all that too much at this point of time. But I am trying to give out some of the basic ideas that you will come across when we get into Kapil's Samkhya. That the consciousness goes through no change whatsoever. The matter which is enveloping my consciousness in terms of this body frame, that goes all kinds of changes and so on and so forth. So there are two distinct kinds of things. Correspondingly, the knowledge is also two kinds. So I will refer to the knowledge pertaining to matter knowledge pertaining to spirit, the consciousness. Now, in Upanishads, the bias is towards the spiritual knowledge. So that is why I had to come back to these terms. But the common feature in Vedic age and Upanishadic age is the people were broadly, by and large, following the Vedic message. They were leading the life, so to say, Vedic way of life. But now the humanity enters into the third phase because of that feature of spiritual decline, which is the undercurrent in the human society. Unless we make great effort, we can create slight ups and downs. If we are lazy, then spiritually we will always decline. Then comes the third age that we call as age of Shaddarshan. Sanskrit terms, this means six, darshan means philosophy. So 6 books of the Vedic philosophy, they were created in this third age. And out of this family, Sankhya is the number one. But before I show you the next slide, this age is slightly different from first two age. Of course, that's why this is third age. So first age is Vedic way of life, second is Vedic way of life, but now they are using the gist of the message of the Vedas in the terms of Upanishad. Now here, the people are toying with the idea of non-Vedic way of life. I will say more biased towards materialistic life, which we are familiar with. Today's world is basically, by and large, 7 billion people are leading materialistic life. So imagine, here came a time when a section of people began to go in the materialistic way of life. But then there were teachers, we call them rishis, they tried to convince them that it is not in your interest to lead a materialistic life, you should follow the Vedic way of life. Now they are not just giving a sermon because you have to convince others. So the first time these are the books which are argumentative in nature. The first two bodies or groups of literature were not argumentative, they were merely saying, asserting, you should do this is what it is, just explaining, just saying what it is. But here, the teacher has to convince that no, that is wrong, this is right, there is a lot of arguments. So this is a new feature, and now their style is also different. They are in what is called sutra, aphorism, while these used to be the verses. In 2 lines there is a statement. But now here, just 2 words or 3 words, probably the capacity was reducing. So even if you have convinced somebody, you want him to remember the philosophical thought pattern. If you have written too many words, then his memory is not helping him. So here came what is called Sutra Shali. You will see, like in the philosophy of yoga, which I am teaching Wednesday evening, yoga Chittavritti Nirodha. This is just one statement. This is not quite a sentence, but it just it embodies a meaning, something in a short form. So this is the feature of this third age. These 6 books of Vedic philosophy I have listed here. The Samkhya by Kapil, that's what we are here to study. Then there is, so I just want to show you, this is my thinking, this is orthodox view and my orthodox view. So it's not mainstream, nobody will accept all this. But I'm quite confident because my evidence is these books exist and they have certain patterns. So you have to make some sense out of it. Why Kapil wrote like this, why Patanjali wrote these things, so on and so forth. Sankhya has a widest coverage, as I say, because it is encompassing the entire Vedic way of life, Vedic philosophy. Of course, the final objective here is to know that you are different from the matter. So essentially, me is my soul, that tiny consciousness, Of course, a common man thinks I am this body frame, I have an ID card with a photograph of my body and all that, which keeps changing and so on and so forth. But deep in thought, we know this is my body, this is not me. Even my two hands are chopped off, I meet an accident, my 2 feet are gone, still I am the same me. So that way that we are forced to think, who is this me, whom I called I? So finally the Vedic philosopher is saying, there is a tiny point-like soul that is you, and all other is the envelopes of matter, one layer after another. There are layers and layers. They are your instruments, your tools for you to lead life in this world. But you are there, just like you came here in a car. Car is an instrument for transportation. Once you reach the destination, you get out of your car, the purpose is solved. So these instruments have certain objectives and purpose, and he is the one who is the user, final beneficiary, the end user, so to say. So this is the Sankhya is trying to teach us, that you get to know that your true self. So at the very innermost link where I meet the matter first. So somewhere here they say it's like thumb in the fist. This is me and there is a mind skin. That is called Chitta here. Patanjali calls it Chitta. Kapil will call it Buddhi. Sometime later I will explain why he called it Chitta and why he called it Buddhi. But at that point, that's where I am interacting. This is my desktop somewhere here. He says, the objective of the human life is for you to know that you are different from this. And that you know only when you make this blank. So when you make this blank, otherwise it just shows you various images. So much so when we go to sleep, dreams are coming here. So when we go deep in meditation, we attempt to make this blank. So objective of deep meditation finally is, if we go to that, reach that stage is, I see myself separated from my instrument of mind. This is called Vivek Khyati. This is a technical term of Kapil. That this is the highest wisdom a human being can arrive at. That's what I should gain. That I am different from my mind. That is the objective of the human life for the Kapil. So that's what he will discuss in Samkhya. So you know roughly what Samkhya will talk about. We'll talk about many, many things, including the philosophy of creation and so on. But finally, the objective is you should calm down your mind and know that you are different from your mind. But then somebody will say, I can read books and know that. No, he says you have to get to know it experientially. You have to experience it to know it. So that's what all we will discuss there. That's what he did in Sankhya. As I have already said, Sankhya is a very wide picture, big picture. It includes the methods to go in meditation and then attain this stage that is there. But then that required some more detail as time passed by. So then appears Patanjali. Patanjali wrote a book on yoga which does nothing but how to achieve that stage. So in Samkhya, that was just a small pocket, how to achieve the objective of the human life. Patanjali has focused on that part because what Sankhya was in less detail, Sankhya had covered, because Sankhya covered the whole thing. That smaller portion had to be expanded more. And that's what Patanjali does after certain thousands of years after Kapil. So in our orthodox view, Kapil is 1.275 million years ago. 1.275 million years ago. He is many, many thousand years ago, but much down the line. So this is a very strange timeline, but And our problem is when Europeans got interested in all this, when in Calcutta they formed Asiatic Society, that was about 200 years ago. At that time, Europeans had an idea that the whole universe is 5,000 years because of Genesis and Judaism, their Bible. So that time they were forced to compress the whole thing in the world in 5,000. Since then, nobody has had time to revise all this. Now scientists are saying they are drawing the timeline about 3 million years ago. So all this is in flux now. We are not much discussing all those confusion. Let's go by this aspect. Now here appears another person named Gotham. He writes a book by Nyaya. Nyaya is basically philosophy of logic. So that is there. By the way, this I am talking pre-Mahabharata period. I hate to call it as a religion because religion is a faith-based religion, and religion has at least certain elements where the logic or rationality collapses. That's why somebody has to take a course to faith. But here you will see this is philosophy of logic only. So Gotham is trying to develop basic logical principles to hold debate. So by now the humanity is degrading and those people who are leading materialistic life, they are using logical fallacies in the debates with Kapil and Patanjali like of people. You can logically sometimes argue things in such a manner that what is not truthful looks like truthful. We call it fallacies, isn't it? So those things were being employed. So Gautam felt it necessary to write a book on philosophy of logic and used illustrations for illustration purpose, the concepts of Sankhya and Yoga. So all those Vedic concepts were used as illustration and he logically proved that it is there. So don't take it as religion. I will say it is kind of unified theory or spiritual science or a scientific way, rational, logical way to look at the world we live in. Where as a scientist, you always try to the invisible forces behind the visible world. So even modern science is not too far away now. They are quite struggling to define consciousness, and so I think they will much benefit from Samkhya. Indeed, I like this to say that I feel even the modern term science has originated from the term Samkhya. That is our Vedic phonetics. Very quickly, this is Kha. So this is called a ghosh word. In our consonants, we have groups of 5, Ka, Kha, Ga, Ga, Ga. Second and fourth is called aspirated sound. So Ka, Kha. So a lot of people who are out of India, they find it difficult. So for them, the easy sound is Ka. So Sankhya becomes Sankhya. And suppose, just to make a long story short, for Sankhya, like some Europeans did, instead of consonant K, they used the alphabet C. There are a lot of examples, like we have a Sanskrit word, namely Samiti, and English word is committee. Sounds similar. Samiti became committee. If they had spelt it with S, probably they would have called it Samiti. But since they chose the alphabet C, and alphabet C is very unusual in English, it has the sound sa as well as ka. So that Samiti became committee. Similarly here, it was Sankhya, and they chose the alphabet C here for Sankhya. Then with oral tradition, that C became Sa sound, so it becomes Sankhya. Sansi then becomes science. It's not that far. This is the oral tradition, how the words were flowing from India to Arab and Middle East and Europe and all that thousands of years ago. So we are here, Sankhya, Yoga, and now Nyaya is philosophy of logic. Now this is more like Kanad is an atomic physicist. He doesn't take matter from that plasma, he takes it from a larger stage, what is called Panchbhut, and that is why he goes to what is called Vishesh. So imagine, like you are sitting on a chair, if you look at two particular chairs, for a layman they are same, identical, similar, whatever you call them. But from a scientist point of view, they are one is chair A and one is chair B, because a scientist will find out that at a molecular level, chair A is very different from chair B, though seemingly they are same. So that difference, what a scientist is looking at, Kanad looks at it as a word vishesh. So what he's saying is everything has an element of vishesh, that it is different from any other. So his starting point is not at the very fundamental particles where Sankhya is talking about. He starts his philosophy at a higher level, but then all the atomic structure level differences, they are attributed to the word Vishesh. That's why his book is called Vaisheshik. Now there's further decline. Now here, by this time, indeed, they have become materialistic people, and they are all becoming more action oriented. Now they are less knowledge based. So, as a human being, we are engaged in two-fold pursuits: incoming knowledge and outgoing action. So, some people are more knowledge based, some people are more action based, some people are skill based. There are all kinds of traits in human beings. So, generally, if you are a philosopher or scientist, you are enjoying the knowledge-based activities more. And the humanity is shifting towards action-oriented, that we see today also. People are interested in all kinds of adventures and activities. So Mimamsa is now more on philosophy of karma. Karma is what I am doing. So here the Rishi Jaimini is trying to convince, yes, okay, you want to perform these karma, but karma should be what are the what is the message in the Vedas. So do's and don'ts should be borrowed from the Vedas. So that is his philosophy, that he says you should not do anything that goes contrary to the Vedas. So you become a good, morally sound human being. Otherwise, you play all kind of mischiefs. Now, they are at the same time, indeed, this person, Badarayan, Jaimini is a disciple of Badarayan. So they are teacher and student. But when we write the chronology, number 5 is the book by Jaimini, and then number 6. This is our tradition. Because there is another nomenclature. This book is called Purv Mimamsa, and this book is called Uttar Mimamsa. Again, I am just saying few things but not elaborating much because of time. So, this book is, the last one is Brahma Sutra. It has another name, Vedanta. The author is Badarayan, but he also is called by another name, Vyas. Vyas is a very well-known name because actually it is not a name, this is a title. So he has this title. Vyas means one who is giving exposition of the Vedic message. So he has a title, and there are a lot of others who have this title. So if you just use his title, not his name, then it gets confusing. So this is what it is. So here, the chronologically, Sankhya came first. I've tried to explain why these authors must have felt the need to write this book. Now here it is interesting. By now there were people who were even questioning the existence of that supreme being, what is called Brahma, which was not being questioned earlier. So now this gentleman Badhayan feels the need to logically convince that an entity like Brahm must exist. So that is his book. So as I have tried to see, there are three levels: Vedic age, Upanishadic age, and Sharddarshan, six books of Vedic. And even here, I personally see a coherent picture why Kapil wrote Sankhya, why Patanjali wrote Yoga, why Gautama wrote Nyaya, and so on and so forth. Now, this timeline is about 6,000 years ago from here, slightly before Mahabharata, number 5 and number 6. Okay, so let's look at, as I have already remarked, there are broadly two kinds of things in the universe: matter and spirit. This is world of consciousness, and this is consciousness. This goes through transformation, but all these things happen for this. He is the central figure, like in a house. We build a house, we buy grocery, we bring all kinds of things because somebody lives in that house. Similarly, we are conscious beings, and all these things happen basically for us. We should make good use of all this. So, as far as a human being is concerned, who is very inquisitive, who wants to know everything around him, the knowledge is also classified as knowledge pertaining to matter and knowledge pertaining to spirit. Now, this is another very unusual, peculiar features of our way of looking at it. What we are saying is spiritual knowledge, which came in the Vedas, is at its climax, and human being cannot add anything to that. This is a very powerful statement, but that has to be understood, and that's what is there. As we have repeatedly, I have said spiritual decline, spiritual decline, spiritual decline, because the spiritual knowledge that humanity started with that was its bank account, was at its highest level. And with time, we have declined. Our understanding has reduced. Of course, theoretically, I can go back to that, but I can never add to that. So nobody can ever add to the knowledge of the Vedas, specifically related to the spiritual knowledge. The material knowledge is given to us in the Vedas, is in the seed form, and human beings are expected to build upon it. So that is may evolve with time, and that is what we are saying. As far as our understanding of material science is concerned, all kinds of disciplines, physics, chemistry, we have hundreds of specialization nowadays. We are building new and new knowledge, new and new technological development. So that is because this can evolve with time, as if ab initio we were given very little knowledge, and we were expected that as we lead our life, we invent the fire, we invent the wheel, and so we have come a long way. We have milk, out of milk we made yogurt, and all kinds of agriculture, all kinds of recipes, dishes. So you name it, we have thousands of books on everything. That all falls in this category, whether we build houses or whatever it is. But as far as this is concerned, that's where it is very important, our ability to be able to connect to this body of knowledge, because if we work independently, we may not even get to know the true spiritual knowledge. And even if we get to know it, it will not be at the level of the blueprint that is there in the Vedas. So that is the way the Indian thought process looks at. Now those rishis, if they were aware of that, they did a fantastic thing. Right from the first generation, there is a fourth body of literature which is very unusual. So I have talked to you about the Vedas, the Upanishads, and six books of Vedic philosophy. They appeared in these three different ages. All this is before Mahabharata, before 5,000 years timeline. But those people were knowing it, that later generations will have difficulty in capturing this knowledge. So they developed a fourth set of literature which is called Vedanga. Very unusual. It is just like, imagine I have a language, my mother tongue. So I look at Vedas as my mother tongue, which people just picked up. For to learn mother tongue, you don't go to a school. You just pick up from your mother. That is your mother tongue. But suppose I moved from India to America, and now my children are almost discussing, talking in English. So English has become de facto their mother tongue. But I want them to know my mother tongue, say it is Hindi. So I want to transfer some skeleton of Hindi language to my children who were born and brought up here by an American mother. So their mother tongue is English. So I will make an effort, I will write a book because their mother tongue is no more Hindi. So I write a book to facilitate them to learn a little bit of Hindi, isn't it? That's what those people thought of it. So they generated literature. So I did not need a book on Hindi because I got the knowledge of my mother tongue from my mother dialect. But those first generation people were aware of this fact that later generations will be deviating away and away from this Vedic body of knowledge. They will need help. So to help them, they created this set of knowledge called Vedanga. This is a huge body of literature. This has 6 faculties, and each faculty, there are thousands of books. Huge body of literature we are talking about. That originated right from the beginning, and it is always going on. So not going into detail, Shiksha is phonetics, the sound, the ability to make sound. Ku Visarjniya Kanta. This is a sutra by Panini. What it means is sound of and ku is ka, they originate from the throat. Pa, they originate from the lips. So like a mother will teach her child how to make out certain sounds, and a child will produce what the way the mother is talking, speaking. So that is what is the phonetics. Like what we will say, a small child goes to the school, the first book of alphabet. This is what it is. And here I must tell you, a number of sounds have disappeared. Today there is no human being who can make all the sounds which are existing in this book. So, I'm trying to point out with passage of time, our ability even to make sound, which is theoretically is there in human vocal cord, but I learned to make sound from my mother, and if she didn't know it, I cannot learn it. And if her mother didn't know it, so that way in these millions of years of history, we are losing sound. And you know it, like in India, we have certain sounds, but if you go to Japan, certain sounds are not there. So, there are societies where there are less and less sounds. So so they take to give us theoretically all that was necessary so that I can go back to the Vedas. That is why it is called Vedanga, the limbs of the Vedas. Theoretically, if I study all this properly, I can comprehend what is in the Vedas. So they were concerned about it and they made it. So very quickly, this is grammar, this is Nuyukta, etymology, because these are all sciences are covered there, phonetics, all linguistics, how the words originated, what are the roots, so how the words of the Vedas, all this is there in these kinds of books. Etymology, then this is astronomy, means how the earth and the sun and so many things happening, the meters, metric literature. This is a huge body of literature called Kalpa, where they made empirical model, just like I will teach my child, because as a child we have all gone through it. How can we believe that earth is round, isn't it? Then my father would show me, he would put a big basketball at the center and a table tennis ball here, That is sun and this is earth. This is rotating. He makes in a dark room, makes a bulb, and they made some model. And then he would tell me, suppose on a table tennis ball there is a small animal, a small insect, and that ball is moving. That ant will not know it that the ball is. So we don't know that the earth is moving so fast. So we are convinced about that. And nowadays, of course, we have many kinds of evidence. So this is a model. Similarly, they used to create all kinds of models that how universe came into being. Everything you can imagine. It was a fantastic way of explaining. And they become in due course as rituals also. We have one very common ritual which has come up to now, that is called Agnihotra. We do a simple fire set. That is the smallest empirical model where the sun and the earth and the water, their interplay is seen. So we create a fire, then we throw some water around it, and that is Agnihotra. So sun is very important, of course. So that is the smallest model we have. Otherwise, there are many, such things, Somyag and Vajpayee Yag and all. Okay, we have come to this. I think at least I made first statement of Samkhya. So we are just 3 minutes before. Won't like to exceed time. First statement in Sanskrit, which is the whole Sankhya is in these many pages here. So some 8 or 10 pages, 6 chapters. It is Patanjali Yoga is only much smaller, which is just 195 lines here. So if I could show on the camera, while this is slightly more, Sankhya is this much, about 10 pages. So, it was, those who understood it, it was not much difficult to memorize it so that everything is in your mind. The first one, if I were to recite, is Athati Vidha Dukhatyant Nivitti Atyanta Purushartha. So, Ath is, now he begins the book. Ti with, sorry, I should have made the transliteration, but I haven't made it. Next time I will be more careful. I have decided to offer this course at a very short notice, so it's slightly not very well done. But next time I will try to. Actually, I did a lot of internet search, a book where the original text and transliteration could be seen, which I found in Patanjali Yoga. But Patanjali Yoga has become more well known. Sankhya is less known, but I couldn't find it. So I will have to type it, then all kinds of those signs, they take too much of time. So anyway, but this is the with. The with means 3 types. Dukh is pain. These are compound words, so they become a long statement. Then there is a word atyanta nivritti. Nivritti is to get rid of. So he says there are 3 types of pain. Of course, as a human being, we instinctively want to get away from anything that is painful. Getting away from something painful is called nivritti. So there are 3 types of pain. I want to get away from them. Atyanta nivritti means in an absolute sense. So, typically I get away from a pain, that same pain or some other kind of pain strikes me again. So, atyanta nivritti is in absolute sense, I want to get away from all the 3 kinds of pain. When I make an effort to get away from pain, it is called purushartha. Purush is that soul, that consciousness, and an effort he makes it called purushartha. I am consciously making an effort, that is purushartha. Usually we make an effort to get away from pain. So he's saying if you want to get away from pain in an absolute sense, you have to make atyant purushartha, a very high order of purushartha. So you must be willing and ready to make a high level of effort so that you can get away from all kinds of pains and misery in an absolute sense. This is what is the objective of the book he is writing. Of course, you can see what kind of confidence he has. He can say that I am going to teach you so that your life will be void of any pain and suffering. That's what he has taken this responsibility. That's why I say it is a very wide coverage. So now, where does the pain come from? He has to start from the whole thing. Nothing is untouched by him. What are our actions? Who is making action? Me or my mind or what? He will talk about everything here. And finally, as I've already said, Atyant Purusharth is finally getting to know that I am different from my mind. That is what he will be proving. We are done with our first session today, and I will resume. So, first day we have, it has become a long introduction. Basically, I have tried to tell you this is one first book in the Vedic philosophy among the 6 books. So I needed to go back to the Vedic age and Upanishadic age and this third age of Sharddarshan, 6 books. I have tried to give you the chronology, and I have remarked another huge body of literature called Vedanta. And now we are ready with to get started on Sankhya. We'll discuss it next time. See you next week. Thank you very much for joining. See you again next week. Have a good time.